Just like with all our sessions, there is the opportunity to ask questions and make comments, so you do have mic wranglers. We have Carrie back here in this side. We have Polly right here in the center, and we have Jennifer right there on that side. And that is enough from me, and take it away, ladies. Thank you.
Gotta get this mic. I'm always so sensitive with mics because the minute you start talking, you either, are screaming to the audience or are whispering. So I wanted to say how excited I was to be a part of this panel today and how inspired I've been by today's sessions and the mentoring and the type of conversations that we've all been having today. And at Forbes, we are a company that was founded by an entrepreneur, my great-grandfather. And so I'm a benefit of an entrepreneur's vision, and you also are creating opportunities and businesses and visions to enable the success of other individuals as well. So this is a really exciting time for me to be here, and an exciting panel for me to talk about today with my distinguished other panelists. As you saw on your agenda, today's theme is what conveys leadership in a crowded marketplace. And as you all know better than I do, it's an incredibly dynamic and challenging economic marketplace. Entrepreneurship is never easy, no matter what the time is. And also, as we know, many people have great ideas, but companies and investors not only invest in ideas, but they invest in people. So they're investing in you all. And the purpose of today's panel is to leverage the expertise and insights of the women to my right to help you understand how to differentiate yourself and how to build a pitch to best represent who you are, what you think, how you think, what your vision is, and what conveys leadership when giving that pitch. And I hope the purpose of today's panel will allow all of you to walk away with some meaningful insights and new learnings as you go into the marketplace and as you develop your pitches, whether it be for new businesses or trying to grow your business to the next level, so that you have some tactical points and insights to help you grow and learn not only from these women, but from your other panelists. So I know you had a quick introduction to the women here today, but I just wanted to quickly introduce them again. At my far right is Megan Smith, who's Vice President of New Business Development at Google and also General Manager of Google Org. So she has a very exciting and dynamic job. One of my favorite parts of her job, though, is at Google.org, and that's a team which leverages Google's greatest strengths in information and technology to achieve extraordinary impact around the globe and advocate for change and policies to impact the lives of millions. To her left is Lori Yoler, and Lori brings a really diverse set of experiences to this conversation today. She is the managing partner at GrowthPoint, and for over 25 years, she's helped emerging technology companies grow and succeed in both an executive role, an advisor role, an investor, and as a board member. So she's seen what you guys are all doing from so many different points of view, so I think it's a really exciting way to leverage the unique perspective you have, Lori, to be able to empower the women here today to do what they want to do. And to my right is Dana Moriello, and she's the co-founder and president of ProFounder, which is a really interesting company and one that I'm excited to learn more about in the weeks ahead. ProFounder is a crowdfunding platform that provides tools for entrepreneurs to raise investment capital from their communities. And I know capital and access to capital is a big topic, and I love the idea of how do you leverage your community and those around you to raise capital and fund your ventures moving forward. So we have a great set of experiences, unique perspectives, and again, the mission of the panel is to help you guys understand how to best form your pitch, leverage their insights and expertise. So I would say ask a lot of questions, and I'll start with a couple of questions questions directly to the panel, and then also ask you a couple of questions to help hear what's keeping you up at night, and then also ask you to feel free at any time to engage with these women with some things that you've been thinking a lot about. So Lori, I'll start with you. Leadership is something we talk a lot about, but it's an intangible. It's a quality that we all revere, but it's something that people define differently, whether it be the ability to motivate, to inspire, to empower others. But we also know that leadership is incredibly important when you're asking investors or individuals to buy into your concept, but also to buy into you as well. When you are working with individuals and given your vast experience, what are some of the most critical leadership attributes that you identify in an entrepreneur specifically?
I've been reading a lot of books on this topic, and there's a lot written, but I also get the opportunity to mentor a number of executives, both in large companies and in entrepreneurial startups. And I have seen a lot of different leadership styles that work very well. So when Moira initially asked me this question, I thought, how am I going to come up with one thing? But I just happened to read a couple of recent articles about this topic, and I thought the one that described it best is finding the best balance between power and love. And defining power as the ability to take action and to push your team to action. And love as the ability to empathize and show compassion. And so finding that right balance, I think, is absolutely critical, whether you're in a large company and running a team or in a small company, because if you are too much on the love side, you're going to have a lovely, wonderful culture and everyone will love you, but you may not achieve your product schedules or your goals. If you're too far on the screaming side or the aggressive urging side, your people may not stay very long, and your reputation for your culture, especially in this age of transparency, may not be ideal. And I think it's, again, fabulous that we have such transparency, because people get to learn very quickly about different leadership styles. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And I am very surprised because this theme seems to be resonating throughout the world right now, both how we talk about the conflicts around the world and talking about in the military the difference between hard power and soft power, as well as New York Times journalist, one of my favorites, David Brooks, has a new book out called The Social Animal. And if you've read any of the things he's talking about, he is talking about how our social connections and our ability to empathize are equally, if not more important, as our power. So that's a theme I've been thinking a lot about.
As you mentioned, leadership has evolved over time, both in terms of how you attain and maintain influence in this highly networked world. So I think that's a great insight to understand how the leadership qualities have been evolving since all of us have entertained some of our entrepreneurial ventures. Dana, you have started a business about a year and a half ago, and you had mentioned that you thought being a great leader and a great entrepreneur were one and the same, but when you went into this new business, you found that they were vastly different. How did this refine your thinking in terms of what was a great entrepreneur, or great leadership skills in the early stages of the entrepreneurial process versus as you started to scale and grow your business and need some more operational focus?
Yeah, this is a really fun one to think back on, because we started the business right off University Avenue, literally in a garage on a ping pong table with three of us who were best friends. And it was a classic story, and that to me was true entrepreneurship, how I always envisioned it in my head and how I always wanted it to turn out. We'd stop in the middle of working, you'd play a little bit of ping pong, we'd go in the middle of the afternoon, we'd be brainstorming, and true entrepreneurship to us were how many ideas could we come up with, how much energy could we generate, how many people could we get excited about what we're doing. And that's really all that mattered, because we weren't actually implementing anything yet, we're just thinking of all these great ideas. We had a ping pong table, and really that's all that matters, right? So that was great entrepreneurship then. We could get other people excited because we were excited about this. And then the first big turning point came when 3 best friends turned out to be 2 business partners and a friend. And when that partnership broke up, that was the first really big learning moment for us to say, this is not all fun and games. This isn't this beautiful vision of entrepreneurship that we thought it was. It was, the epitome of a teachable moment. We said, wow, we have to really, be serious about how we can act as leaders and evaluate each other and how we can work together, not just as friends, but as co-founders and co-leaders. And that was one big turning point. And the next big turning point came when we then, after that transition, we moved the business to Los Angeles. We're now a team of 9. And throughout that transition, we went from now having an employee who, our last employee asked us about if we had a 401k plan, and I just stared at him blankly, what are you talking about? So that was when we really started to think about now what is leadership in this very changing culture that we have. We want to maintain that entrepreneurial spirit, but we have people on our team who are, having kids and have families to provide for, and it's a different kind of responsibility that I feel. So whereas what was most exciting to me about the culture with my 2 best friends was that I could go to yoga in the middle of the afternoon and, brainstorm during all those things, and my schedule is my own and responsible only to each other. I want to be at work at 9, not because I want to punch in the clock at 9, so I want to set an example that I'm working hard too, and I'm there for my team when they need me. And whereas I used to know exactly what I was going to be able to accomplish in a week, now I have no idea what I'm going to accomplish because whatever my team needs, I'm there to do.
So leadership in the early stages of entrepreneurship seems to be the ability to convey that passion about your vision and to be able to convey that passion and inspire that vision in others. Obviously, over time, as your business grows and things like 401k plans come into play, that changes the leadership styles. When you are making your pitch to investors or individuals inside a company or to investors, part of what you're pitching is you and your personal brand, who you are, what you think. This is a challenging thing, I think, for a lot of us to do, to be that self-aware, but to also to understand what the needs are, what the interests are of the people across the table. Megan, I'll ask you, you made a really great point in terms of being able to be a little bit more creative in terms of thinking about articulating the skill sets that are valuable, that you might not even know are valuable to the people across the desk from you. What are the types of things that you need to be thinking about when communicating your personal brand?
Sure. Maybe by way of example, I think, we talked about different phases of leadership time, as a company gets bigger or smaller. But no matter what, across the board, it's sort of ability to act. Whether it's small and you're at the ping pong table and now you're going to okay, what's our business? Let's start. And you may have a very big idea, but you need to do the first thing and the second thing and the third thing. And how do you, get the team moving in that direction? And so I think that maybe from a personal brand perspective, you need to demonstrate that you're the kind of leader who can do that. So whether you can show, in your, say, at a VC pitch or something where you can show what you've already built or how you've already translated this incredibly big idea into action, or whether you don't have that yet and you need to rely on some other things. So I was making a point a lot of times in interviews, especially for my team at Google is new business development. So I have sort of the entrepreneurial BD people. They would work at a startup if they weren't at Google. I need people who are very agile. They want to get going. And so I often ask them about what they did in high school. I want to know, did they organize the dance and 300 people showed up and then they raised this money and then over here 3 people, that kind of person that just made it happen. You remember them from high school, you remember them from college. They were always up to something and they also got pretty good grades and they also were on the swim team and the volleyball, and that is who I want to hire. And that's who I would like to invest in if I was in that venture mode also, I think, because you want to look at people who can deliver, act in a lot of different frames. And so that was my point there, which is it may not be exact translatable thing that you can say in a business context I did these 3 things, but you in a pitch might be able to say I'm the kind of person who knows how to translate a big idea into action. Even when I was a kid I did blah blah blah. There's a great behavioral one where Steve Jobs calls it's the head of one of the chip companies to get some chips because he can't get them at Fry's. That's a great vignette. You have those from your background. Use them.
Did you organize the dances when you were in high school and those things?
I did a lot of things, including we had this crazy thing where we just sell all these light bulbs, and so we had way too many, and all my fellow seniors were done selling the light bulbs, and so I franchised it to 5th graders and got rid of all of them.
I love that. You're used to entrepreneurship at some of the youngest ages. Lori, you have also talked about the need to be able to create this personal narrative, not only what Megan talked about in terms of your ability to act, your ability to execute, to take leadership and responsibility, but how do you also create a narrative around your personal brand? And that's a word that I know is sometimes overused, but how do you effectively tell your story in the context of the business that you're trying to convey and that you're trying to inspire others to invest in?
So I have a lot of thought around this, and when people first started talking about personal branding, I thought, oh, these horrible people who are going to boast about all the things they've done in their life, run for the hills. And when I worked for large companies, it was, hi, I'm Lori from Visa. Hi, I'm Lori from Sun Microsystems. Hi, and my company brand was so strong that I never added any personal elements. And a little bit ago, I was going to a big conference, and as Moira said at the beginning, I've done a lot of different things. So what I'm doing right now is only a small vignette of what I've done, and I liked how Megan just put that umbrella over, I'm someone who gets things done. It's not what you're doing this moment, it's something that you've done since you were a child. But it's hard to come up with that, because it's so much easier when you have a big brand behind you and you can say, hi, I've been at this company forever and I am this brand. This is me. So for me, I used to have trouble at conferences, and I was the worst at personal branding, which is why I realized I didn't like it. So I used to go up to a conference and people say, especially men, because women will tend to talk about something other than who are you and what do you do when you meet them at the coffee bar. So I walked up and there are all these powerful men, and the first one comes up to me and says, what do you do? And I say, well, I've been a venture capitalist, and I've started a bunch of companies, and I worked in a bunch of big companies, and now I'm kind of helping mentor other people. And I realized they were running the other direction. And so I thought, okay, I need way better messaging on an overarching thing of what is my passion and what do I love to do. And so at this last time at the conference, I said, I'm Lori Yoler. I help a bunch of entrepreneurs and scientists to achieve their dreams and make their businesses successful. Next moment, it was like, wow, that's really interesting. Will you tell me about one of the entrepreneurs you're helping right now? And then I would go get into this passionate talk about one of the ones that I just worked with and the amazing things that had happened. And then they'd say, wow, you must have an incredible background to be able to do that over and over again. And so suddenly I'm relaying all the stuff that I had said in a really boring way at the beginning, but in a much more dynamic way. And so I tested this on a bunch of girlfriends who are very successful executives a few weeks ago in an evening, and I said, okay, guys, I finally have figured out how to give an elevator pitch. Now give yours. And it was so fabulous because these were all these really accomplished women, and each one of them, I'd go around, and one of them said, I work for this very large company, and I run this product. And I said, wait a minute, you were at the top of your class in engineering, and you have a master's, and you have all these dynamic things you do in the rest of your life. You are not equivalent to the product you are now working on. Tell me about you, not your product. And it's funny because we tend to immediately gravitate to what we're building, and obviously for entrepreneurs, what you're building, your company and your product are critically important, but you need to think about more broadly your persona and how you're going to achieve an act. So anyway, off my soapbox, but it's a great exercise.
Just to build on that, I think in a lot of ways, I was lucky to do a lot of acquisitions for Google. I did Earth and Maps, Picasa, and I think that founders are almost like genetically predisposed to what they do. They just love it. They're obsessed with that topic, and they just go. The best founders do that work. And so, to your point, I think really tapping into what's sort of the meta reason why you're doing this, that might be the elevator pitch with maybe a little bit of information, extra information, like I love to help these talented people do their thing, in the better way that you said it. That's an interesting point. And so I think for people to think a lot about, it isn't my resume list that I'm going to sort of parrot back to you really fast, but what is it that I love to do at a passion level that is about this topic that I'm working on now?
We've seen at Forbes that the ability to most effectively convey and inspire people is through storytelling and through narrative. So I think it's so important to be able to talk about a personal brand, but also about the ability to talk about your narrative in the context of being an effective leader, someone who can move from passion to execution, whatever the stage of leadership is. Dana, you obviously just started this business a year and a half ago and had talked about going from the ping pong table to a 401k. A lot of us have this pitch process, and now we have some insights in terms of maybe how to better round it out. But how do you start to practice that pitch process? How do you build your board of advisors? How do you build that elevator pitch? And who did you use to help you build the confidence to go out into the marketplace and talk about what you've done and who you are?
Yeah, I think we were lucky in that it came very naturally, that we're so excited, like you were saying, the passion of founders. We're so passionate about what we're doing, we would talk to anybody who would listen walking down the street about what it was. But we definitely took every piece of feedback to heart. So for instance, our business is about crowdfunding, and that means very different things to different people. So sometimes, especially because my co-founder comes from the nonprofit space at Kiva, when we talk to people about it, they'd say, oh, so you're starting a nonprofit and you're going to help people raise donations. So no, you didn't hear anything that we just said. That's not at all what we just said. But that's what we would hear. And so we'd take that feedback to heart. And then sometimes people would say, we'd give the exact same pitch, and they'd say, so you're going to build a new regulatory framework and you're going to become a lobbying agency. And said, no, we're not going to do that either. So we definitely didn't get it right the first time, and we iterated and iterated and iterated and talked to everybody who would listen, not just other founders or other funders, anybody, and gathered a diverse range of opinions about what that is. And I think it was interesting that you were mentioning story before, because not only did I get a chance to learn from my own pitching process, but the very nature of my business is that I talk to entrepreneurs all day, every day about their pitches and help them craft the pitches that they're going to be giving to their community. And what I found is most powerful there by far is taking someone from what often is a natural impulse of, my pitch entails, my market is this big, I'm going to make this much money and sell this product to this person, to, hi, this is my name and this is what I want to do and here's why I want to do it. Because I need to compel you to go on this journey with me, and if you're not totally convinced that I want to be on this journey myself, you're certainly not going to come with me. So that's the conversation that I have all day.
I would just be curious from one or two women in the audience, what are some of the pain points that you have when you're developing this pitch process? What do you find hardest or most challenging that you think we can help work through in this session?
To sound confident without sounding cocky. Yes, to sound confident without sounding cocky.
That's a great point, and I would love to hear your perspectives, because we've written a lot at Forbes Woman about the challenge of being able to talk about your accomplishments, to talk about them in the context of me versus we, without necessarily sounding overly aggressive or discounting the impact and value of your team. So who wants to weigh in on that fine balance of being humble, but also being able to effectively articulate your accomplishments and the great values and skill sets that you bring to the table?
I'll start. Okay. I'm sure we all have something on this. I think a couple things. I think you want to be forceful and present and really go for it. So you want to be almost cocky, in part of it, right? But I think where the test is when somebody asks you a question and how you start to interact with them, especially if, let's say that you're in the middle of figuring out what your pitch is and it's not quite right. It's how well do you listen, because it's in the listening and how you respond that they'll know whether you're confident or cocky. I think that's my experience. And so I think you should go for it. It's interesting that Heidi Roizen is here because Heidi was part of a business school case. She's an extraordinary entrepreneur, venture capitalist, a million different things that she's done, and her leadership in Silicon Valley is great. And the interesting thing on the case was it's Howard Roizen and Heidi Roizen in giving business school students a man's and a woman's name with a profile and then seeing how they react. So I do think that women face slightly different issues on this cocky versus confident, which is real. And so you just have to be conscious of it. But I think maybe part of that is maybe overconfidence, but also really good listening and iterating back with them. The guys want to support us. So they're not trying not to. And so you just have to figure out how to help them, make what they're dreaming to happen also happen with you.
I think one of the really important things is having your facts behind you, because I think as women, when we come in, we already have a very, very different persona. And so I think coming across confident and being able to back up your claims, yet again, showing that you're listening, you're taking in feedback, but you're confident enough that, a little bit of criticism is not going to blow you off of your goal, and therefore you're willing to take input, but you also have done your research and therefore can back up the things that you are suggesting. And I think it's a really tough balance, because you want to be very confident, but also humble and deferential to someone who may be on your board and giving you money, and you want to show that you can be deferential and you can listen. So it is a really tough balance.
And the reason why this matters is because I think there was a Kleiner study. Most companies are doing something completely different with it. Not completely, but fairly different from what they first, the essence of their start, or they iterate. It's not, there are very few companies that are exactly as their business plan. I think Intel is one of them. Their business plan was 1 page long, and you should read it. It's impressive. But you have to be able to iterate, and that's why this ability to hear the feedback, they're watching your leadership ability to iterate. And that's what, this process is about, in addition to your confidence to force this forward as the founder and leader. And it's those two things that matter a lot in leadership, the ability to listen and the ability to push.
Passion and confidence, obviously, are two really important things that people are looking at. But as you touched on, sometimes passion can be entrepreneurs' Achilles heel, and that is they are so passionate in their vision that they sometimes, Megan, as you've said, can be blind to the comments and the feedback around them, or not necessarily be willing to listen. So their greatest quality can sometimes be the greatest weakness. Dana, you had said that you've experienced this or seen this at different critical junctures before. How have you been able to navigate that process?
The process of transitioning to a leadership position?
Process of transitioning to a leadership position, but also being incredibly passionate about your vision, but also recognizing the need to potentially have people give you feedback on your pitch, or to have outside perspectives and insights of people who might know more than you do about an area, but where your passion is so strong that it's a fine balance between listening and defending.
The biggest turning point for me came when we had our first customer, and I felt a new level of accountability to translate something that was very internal passion that just kept me running every day to having to think about somebody else. And especially in a field like fundraising, where the tools that I was providing to this person were make or break for their future in this phase of their lives, I felt that new sense of responsibility that no matter how passionate I was about this path, if I was going on a path that wasn't helping this customer, my passion for helping this customer far outweighed my passion for executing on this particular product or particular path that I thought that I was going down. So that changed the whole game for me.
We've talked about some of the things that make great pitches, but obviously there's trends, and you guys have seen more pitches than I think anyone can possibly imagine. I'll start with you, Megan. What's one common misstep that you see frequently made by people coming in and sitting across the desk from you?
I think staying too much with the market research, like kind of PowerPointing at people for way too long in the meeting. Let me tell you all about this market. It's just too much information. You want to have a highlight sense that the person knows what this market they're going to go after is and what the issues are with the customer. And then you'd like to see what they think should be done. What product do they want to build? How do they want to approach this? And then you want to hear, it's sort of people have talked about the pitch, and here sort of there's these pieces like, okay, what's the need? What are you going to do? And who's this group that's going to do it? And what about them is making them the right team here? And how you're going to approach it. Sort of that mix of that and quickly showing that and then getting into discussion, I think, is important. I don't know, Laura, you have a lot more experience with VC, pitching, et cetera, if you have comments on.
Laura, yeah, what's your perspective? Because obviously there's these different components to a pitch, But when you're trying to build one, you understand that there's these different components, but there's no roadmap. Obviously, networking is fantastic because you can ask other people who've been in the process. But do you have any advice in terms of creating that framework to make sure that you're thoughtfully and carefully addressing these key components that Megan had outlined?
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen almost the opposite of what Megan has seen when people have pitched, because sometimes they come very early and they haven't done their research, and I go nuts when they're coming in and they're starting a company around this, and I see hundreds of ideas and I know more about their topic than they do. So why are they in my office? And I will try to help them, but do some. I mean, the resources online now are so extraordinary to be able to really research a topic. So it's not that I want to see 100 pages with quotes from every research report, but I do want them to say, here's what's been tried before and failed. And here are the typical margins for this industry, and here's why I'm going to do it better, and here's why this is such an exciting concept. So the stuff that I don't like is when I get fluff and less credible pitches, and people haven't done their homework before they come in. Is the one thing that drives me crazy.
Another piece of that is that every single thing is in an ecosystem. And so sometimes people come and they're like, oh, I don't have any competition.
Right.
No one else is doing anything like this.
Yes.
Which is completely unheard of. Like any idea in the world, it's probably happening simultaneously by 10 different people. Whether they execute well on it is where the differentiation is. Or sometimes it's interesting to just understand who are the other players, what's their different approach, and to hear the person talk about what they see out there. And in fact, just in this world of such a networked thing, you can learn a lot from these competitors about what you might or might not want to do. And so being blind about that is a huge mistake. And it's really annoying to people who are like, that it just seems very naive if you say that.
I would also add being conscientious of who you're pitching to. So I heard you talk, Lori, about what's important to you when you hear a pitch. It's often very different things if you're pitching to your community. So when you're pitching to the community, we've seen that what's most effective is first thanking the people. The most effective pitches start with thank you for being my community and helping me get to where I am today. And it's amazing how people forget that part. And then forgetting to say why you're doing what you're doing, and just leading with the data if you're speaking to your community is not as compelling as saying this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now here's also some data to back up the reasons for why I'm doing that, but let me tell you my personal story, and then ending with, and here's the ways that you can support me very specifically, not leaving it open-ended for, okay, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but here's the very specific things that you could contribute to this success.
That's a great point. Know who you're pitching to, and also know who the right people to pitch to are. And we've had a lot of conversations on Forbes and on Forbes Woman in terms of how do you identify who's the right person to go to for funding, how do you know what stage you really are in. Lori, what advice would you give to people in terms of understanding who to pitch to, and also what are the different resources that they might not be necessarily thinking about? I think we have a lot of preconceived notions in terms of, well, if I want to do X, I need to go to these people. Are there different ways to start to creatively think about who to pitch to and how to find funding?
So first, I'm dying to hear more about ProFounder, and some of the new online resources like The Funded did not exist when I was certainly out trying to raise capital. And so again, much more transparency. If you haven't been onto The Funded, and I want to learn much more about, I quickly went to your site, but I'm very excited that it's there. Same problem in a lot of the venture firms who you pitch to, or even angel groups or others. If they are not experts in your industry, they may take a meeting simply to take a meeting and to meet with you and to hear cool ideas, but you're probably wasting everyone's time. And so again, it goes back to research. And it's funny because I'll get a lot of entrepreneurs who'll come into my office saying, I just got a meeting with Sequoia, I'm so excited. And I would say, oh, that's really interesting, but they just invested in your direct competitor, or they've decided to get out of that space. So why is it that you're excited? But that's really nice. So again, really doing the research. And some people will say, oh, my neighbor's a VC, so I'm going to go meet with his firm, and that's nice, they're your neighbor. But I'd rather go out and ask people I really trust that I have read, either they're, have written something phenomenal about the space, or so many of them have blogs now, a lot of the venture capitalists and angels do, and say, wow, this is a really clueful person, and I've checked their references. They seem really savvy about my space. They've written that they're kind of excited about this space and have a really interesting background and don't have any competitive investments. And I've had great references, and so it's really asking around and, again, doing a lot of research, but the tools are all out there to do it so effectively now.
We talked a little bit, just touched on briefly in terms of gender, and does this ever shape how you convey and pitch yourself in this process, and touched upon that in the question of sounding confident without being aggressive. And there's a lot of conversations about the ways in which certain attributes, leadership attributes, are found more in women versus men, some which are better and some which are not. Megan, do you think gender does affect how women approach the pitch process, whether it be that they undersell themselves or whether it be the fact that they have trouble making the ask? Are there things that you see that are gender specific, that are certain trends that keep bubbling up?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer. I think I see some of that. I think it's earlier than that, the issues. I think that people do well pitching. I think it's more, it was once I worked at a company called General Magic, and I was with my friend Amy Barnett, who was an electrical engineer from Apple, had several chips in lots of different Macs. And the two of us were not in the lab at the time, and we were remarking that an ASIC had just come back, and Tony Fadell, who's the iPod creator, was just out of school, and he was working on that, and a bunch of people, and we just were noting, like, all the guys were in the lab, and we were not. And that there was something in gender and sort of, I don't know, maybe having more women and men together in the lab would keep more women in there. And so in the same way, maybe a lot of companies are started, the Y Combinator founder, they don't let you have one person come and be a Y Combinator. You have to be in the team, because if you can't convince your roommate, this is their theory, then your idea doesn't work. And so I think that a lot of times things are founded by the guys together. And so we just need more women at the entry point in, and then we'll have more women in venture, more women across it. And I think that's happening. That's starting to happen. And it will expand. And I think the biggest meme, more on the .org side, that I'm seeing is just the focus on women and girls and the capacity building globally, and this meme that has entered, just conversation everywhere about the 21st century, and that this is the big issue for the 21st century and the big opportunity. So, yeah, I think it definitely plays in. I don't know exactly what to do about it.
So I want to open the questions up to you all to be able to ask these extraordinary women some questions. But I'll just start by asking you one question just in terms of gender. I know in the venture capital world there's a lot of talk about the lack of funding that women receive, and there's a lot of anemic statistics, no matter where you go, that tend to get talked about a lot. But there was a study that was done for the Center for Women's Business Research, where it said that 85% of the women recently surveyed didn't believe that being a woman was detrimental to their business success, and 32% felt that it was beneficial. Just by a raise of hands, how many of you have felt that being a woman has in some way heavily influenced or shaped your process as an entrepreneur that it might not, versus your male peers, both good and bad?
Wow.
And how many have you felt that it's helped in a positive way? And any of you in a negative way?
Well, half and half. Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. So it's just so interesting in that statistic, because it was really powerful, and I think obviously you guys are experiencing this day in and day out. So probably even better than a research study, you have the perspective that's most relevant, because this is what you're experiencing on a regular basis. So with that, I want to open the questions up to all of you.
The Y Combinator bit at the end, I'm a Techstars graduate. They have a similar policy. They made an exception for me.
Yeah.
Sorry. And as it worked out, at the time that I raised my A round, I raised almost twice as much as any tech star ever had. Now, raising a lot isn't the point. I got to make the company succeed. But how do you think, I think women statistically start solo more often and start later more often. And that doesn't fit the pattern match of the young tech incubators. And, you know, thank God Brad Feld and David Cohen gave me a chance. What do we do to change that?
This is a really good point. When I was running Planet Out, which is an early stage kind of content community company, the gay community online, we realized in the small startup team that all of the men had not graduated from college, and all of the women had advanced degrees. So that's an interesting thing. So somehow the degree was like the stamp on your head that you were in the club. And the not graduating from college, you know, you got to go get to Silicon Valley. All of them were like, I got to get to Silicon Valley. And they had been in college, but they were like, I have started this thing, I got to keep going. You know, the Gates model. So it's an interesting point about starting later and about teamwork and stuff. I don't know if other people have comments.
To me, one of the really big things that I had to learn, and I don't know if it's different for women than for men, but it was handling rejection over and over and over again. And going out for the ask as a woman rather than waiting for someone to come to you. And it was really helpful when I was going out to get funding for Tesla Motors, and we needed a lot of funding. You know, after the first 75 venture firms told us we were smoking something bad, I started to feel this little doubt in the back of my mind that, wow, maybe we are completely insane. And so I remember going home thinking, wow, you know, maybe this isn't the right thing. And it was so great because I called the CEO at the time and said, so what do you think? And he said, clearly we haven't met the right venture capitalists yet. Let's get back into it. And so for him, it was the fact that 75 firms had turned us down was not all that important. And so it just took that conversation to say, okay. And I read some statistics that Cisco had met with 68 firms that had rejected them before they got funding. And, you know, it's funny because one of my girlfriends is a fairly well-known author, and her third or fourth book just came out, and she had told me that in her previous books, she wrote an average of 40 drafts of each chapter and re-edited 40 drafts. And so I went up to her new book is out, and so I went up to her the other night during her book launch, and I said, I gotta know, does it take you less than 40 times to get it right? And she said, no. So persistence really, really pays. And so I think, you know, get over the rejection, being turned down thing, and just say, it's a matter of course.
It's almost like being an entrepreneur, you get rejected more than being an actor. I mean, I feel like after what you said, it's even tougher than you know, breaking into Hollywood. So, but I think that's a great point. How do you find the resilience? But also, I think you made another really good point. How do you leverage the experiences and the rejection and failures and difficult times of others to give you the confidence that that's part of the process? Another question over here.
Hi, I want to say I felt really advantaged being a woman. I was raising money, and it turned out I was meeting with a lot of the old salts of Silicon Valley, and I think they were just so excited to be supposed to know that. I raised money. I raised about $650,000 4 years ago for a venture that basically we launched the day Lehman Brothers closed, so that was quite our kiss of death. My question is, I seem to be obsessed with trying to make their money back for them. And I don't know when it's time to just move on. You have a lot of responsibility for this money, and after a while, you feel like every dollar you spend is your own dollar, and of course that's what angel investors want to see. But every venture doesn't go well. So when is it time to say, okay, this one didn't work out, now I should just move on to the next thing?
I think you have to look at your metrics, like, are the customers coming? You know, if it's a web thing, are there users? You sort of have to measure for success. And if it's not working out, then is there an exit? That a way that maybe what you've built is a feature that's an extraordinary feature for something else, or, you know, can you combine with somebody else? Is it actually a business development transaction to be done and some M&A? I think is often a path to really consider if you're not getting the kind of pickup that you expected. One of the things that recently, one of our founders, Larry Page, was really focused on, actually, Sergey too, is some hardware projects and products that are too long lead for the venture world. And so that's where sort of the self-powered car.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, some of our unusual projects. But we have this team now called Google X, and it's really things that we think are very promising, but they're probably more like 5 to 7 years to be really possibly a business, maybe for its first version. That doesn't mean you don't ship something and you don't hire talent who is very big sky and very, iterate and ship quickly, and really do pragmatic work towards that, not a research project, but an innovation, venture, but just a little longer lead. So you may have a product that's like that. It's longer than the time horizon of that venture, so it may want to be inside of something else again to get there. It may actually be research. So, that's what I would think about. I don't know, thoughts you guys have?
Definitely been in the same position, and my thought is as long as the need is still there, I feel like I'm smart enough to find a solution for it. If I find that the need is not there and I was wrong about the need, then I think that that's a very different turning point.
Friend with Big Green Curse. It strikes me that we women have really the opportunity to revolutionize the way business is done. And we can do that because we bring such different values to it. I was at the hotel yesterday having lunch, and two guys were sitting there huddling, and when they walked away, they gave each other a high five, and they said, now let's go make some money. And I was talking to the group of women that I was sitting with at the party last night, and they're all saying, we wouldn't say that. We'd say, we're all very different.
Yes. Yes.
Carpool. Anything wrong with that? And I'm worried that as all of us are getting into this fabulous place where we're really redefining the economy for the world, that we're going to recreate the same economy that is really trashing the world in a whole lot of ways. So I'm not sure what the solution is, because there's all the venture capitalists are male, and the leaders of all these companies still they're trying to do business for male. But I guess I just want to make a plea that we don't lose track of the values that have really brought us in, so that we don't create and sort of walk in the same footsteps. We have to really make our own footsteps, I think, if we want to make a new and better world.
Yes.
Here. One thing that's a data point that might be interesting to people is the Engineers Without Borders, I think, is about 13,000 engineers, lots of university students, but also professional engineers, very much like Doctors Without Borders, and they're over 50% women. So I think service-based technology is very interesting to women. So again, make a difference versus make a money. People also want to make money, and they figure that out, but I think the different side is very attractive to people, and as some of the problems of the world are addressed through commercial ideas, the people who want to make a difference and do it in a commercial way are kind of coming out of the woodwork.
Well, and as you're seeing in social entrepreneurship, and certainly every time I talk to an NGO, they say they finally realize that it's women who are the ones they want to invest in developing countries, who are the ones that are taking an entrepreneurial idea and really driving it forward, and they feel more confident giving them both the funding and the ability to drive those businesses forward. So I think we're seeing a lot of that as well. And as I said, we're talking about soft power, we're talking about nurturing. There's so many things that are now being realized that are so valuable for building businesses and for the world that tend to be more female traits or feminine traits. So.
And the boys are being raised in this setting. I have two boys, so in our family. So the boys are also getting conscious of this. So I think the young people, kids in elementary school, high school now, are very different about values and about these issues. If you talk to the millennials and you go on campus today, they're focused on green energy and social entrepreneurship. They have a dual Sputnik going on, and they're really interested in this stuff, and they want to do things. And I don't know if for the Americans or for people it comes from 9/11, because they're sort of a decade out of that, and they're being like their Vietnam era folks, how can we make this better, not be afraid? And so they're acting on bringing the world together, but it's definitely a huge movement. It's global, and because they have the network, they have their baby boomer parents who are very agile, they are able to really act at scale, which is exciting.
And I would just add, we talk a lot about different qualities and leadership traits that tend to be more found in one gender versus the other. And I think it's really important to almost take gender out of the equation and say, what are the leadership skill sets that are important to making an effective leader? Yes, some of them might be in women. Yes, some of them might be in men. But through creating diverse teams and promoting those diverse leadership skill sets, that's I think the way to drive meaningful change. And again, it's not about gender, but it's about what's best for business, what's best for the world, what's best for our teams, and how do we really pinpoint what those skill sets are and learn both from what men do really well, and hopefully they can take that same approach with what we do and what all of you do here today.
This is great. You brought it back to where my question was. So a comment and a question, both sort of double tapping back on differences between men and women, things that women do to maybe get a better position or a worse position, like when they're going out and get a better or worse experience based on gender. And the comment I want to make, I'm from Christine here from Intel Capital, and I beg everyone in this room, if people won't automatically know who you are, please put how credible you are and your background at the beginning of your pitch, because it's the #1 mistake. Everyone I've ever met who gives a pitch doesn't say how credible she is at the beginning of it. And sometimes, unfortunately, you need to, because people won't assume, which is different from a guy's pitch or a man's pitch to that. So establish credibility, please. And then my question is, I think it would be great to get some specific examples. I think it's super helpful around what are some things that you have seen women do that maybe help them because of gender, and what are some things that they might do that maybe hurt them, just through stylistic things around gender.
Kind of anecdotal stories of all the pitches we see to the community coming through on our site. We tell people, as a general rule, don't think about asking for money, think about offering an opportunity. And it's interesting to see how men and women both adopt that. So we have so many male entrepreneurs who will write in their pitch, and you'll make 100 times your money, you're going to be so rich, this is like getting a winning lottery ticket, this is great. I haven't seen one woman say that in her pitch or anything even close to that. And not that the men should be saying that, and we advise them not to and all that good stuff, but it's just interesting that this trait seems to lie there. And then there's some women that I've had to talk to them on the phone repeatedly. Why can't you see this as an opportunity? If you had a great hairstylist, would you tell me about that hairstylist? Why can't you see this the same way? And walking through those analogies is definitely have been, for the entrepreneurs on our site, more hand-holding.
I think the biggest thing that I have seen is not going after the big idea and pitching a small idea that's controllable, maybe incremental, a goal that they know they can reach or feel 90% confident they can reach, instead of saying, I'm going to change an industry, I have a big vision, and I'm going to go for it. And that's the biggest mistake I think I see women make, because it isn't just about them and what they can do to max out their credit card. It's going to hopefully be a whole ecosystem and whole team going after a big goal and a big vision.
Any examples of how women have played the strengths?
Yeah, I think lots of. What I was going to talk about, and then come back to the strengths. I think one of the things that's really important is that, just like getting a job, you get a job usually by who you know, LinkedIn kind of thing. So how do you think about, if you want to raise money, what VCs do you know, and how can you, maybe if your VC's your neighbor. That neighbor is not necessarily going to give you money, because when you do your research, you find out that they invest in clean tech and you're trying to do the web or whatever. But they do know, they could, on a Saturday afternoon, hear your pitch and coach you about your pitch and talk to you about it. You need a couple of VCs. When I was younger in the Valley, I ran into a couple of different really good VCs. One of them, Roger McNamee, who I'd just call up and talk to him, and he would tell me different things I should be doing. And he'd also make introductions, because the VC who's your neighbor might not be in web, he might be in clean tech, but he knows who's in the web, and he can introduce you to them. So I think maybe a strength and weakness is the people who do leverage the network in that way, in a mentorship component, an iterative way, for intros and learning, and have coaches who are VCs do well, and people who don't can't get in they can't figure out why they're not getting funded. They're not getting funded because they're not in the game.
One question over here.
No, I'm under the microphone. I can ask it from here. We talked about pitches, but we haven't really talked about the team and what you look for in a team. and that a lot of the women who start are solo starters, building the team, and then what should be in the team in order to make an effective pitch. And my name is Michelle Berry with Locally Grown News.com.
Locally Grown News, cool.
So I talked a little about in my introduction. I had experience with the team that we started with 3 founders and then wound up splitting. And I think what I will always carry with me as a lesson from that experience is having the tough conversation about shared values and shared vision for the business forward. And I imagine if I was evaluating a team, I would want to ask them that question if they had that conversation, because they can see how destructive not having it is. Be one insight.
For me, it's really hunger and passion there with the team, because you may have someone who is the world expert on a topic and has been in the industry forever, but you don't feel that they have that hunger to do whatever it takes to make this succeed. And so you get a feeling that maybe they're dabbling. And then the people they attract around them is the personality so strong that they're getting extremely junior people around them that are not their equals or their betters, if we're talking with a single CEO, or are they able to really get top players and surround themselves with top players. So those are really the things that I'm looking for. Is this someone who can really build a phenomenal team, and have they got that just undying passion and hunger?
I think a couple things. A couple of years ago, somebody went and interviewed the different engineering SVPs at Google about leadership and about just for some internal things about who they promoted and why and how they thought about that. And so one of the things that was really striking was one of them said that they were always watching in the room, like if there was a team of engineers, who was the engineer in the room who wasn't necessarily the strongest programmer, but was the one who was able to source the best ideas from their colleagues. Mm-hmm. And kind of help lift those up, that leadership was the most important leadership, because you didn't want consensus, you wanted the best thing to rise. And so if somebody had that skill to tease that out of their teammates, would be an extraordinary leader. And so they always were promoting that type. So I think that's interesting as a general rule of thumb to look at, and I think it speaks to the person, if there's somebody who's so strong that they have to hire these people who are just never going to take over their job in a way, that they're somehow threatened, that's valuable. I also think that it matters, getting along matters. So who do you have chemistry with, to work with? Who do you really want to work with, especially the startup, you work so crazy hard. You want to make sure that you want to work with those people, and if there's somebody who's being a bit toxic in that environment, you're doing a favor to everybody to have them not be there. It's actually probably a favor to them, because they're probably not liking it either. So sort of fast fail, not only on products, but also in the team, like let a team release people. So I think those would be things. And that doesn't mean that maybe that superstar expert couldn't be an advisor instead of your head of marketing, advisor for marketing, and in your advisory board, and maybe you get somebody different there. So those are a couple thoughts.
So as we're wrapping up, one last question, and I'm going to direct the question to you guys, because we've talked a lot about different leadership skills across the paradigms of starting a business, running a business, working with teams, and what you think works and doesn't work. But I'm going to put the spotlight on you and ask you, what was the toughest leadership lesson and challenge that you had to learn as you navigated your careers? I'll start with you just because you're to my right. And
yeah, I don't want to harp on the same example over and over, but by far the biggest challenge I've had is keeping having that conversation about values and separating that from personal friendships or other reasons that you would want to be together. So that was by far the hardest, and that also repeated itself a few months later with hiring someone for reasons that were not as analytical as we should have, and then having to look back at that decision and look at conversations that we'd missed about not shared values, not same vision for the company.
The other one besides getting over rejection would be getting over the need to control and learning how to effectively delegate and build a whole ecosystem both within the company and outside the company.
I think two things. One is the story that you told about having to rework the founders. The Excite team was founded by 7 people, and they had to rework that, and then the people all stayed, but there were really 2 people who were the leaders, and they became CEO and CTO. And so having those kinds of conversations is really important. I think for me personally, probably hard learning. When I ran a company called Planet Out, when it was cash flow positive, fine, it was ready, as an entrepreneurial type, to go back to the startup-y stage and hand off to the next group. We chose good people. It was a complex time because the bubble had burst and rebuilt, and so we didn't have lots of choice at that time. But I think we didn't choose the people who had the exact shared values of us, and they ended up not really valuing product and engineering in the way that we did, and the customer base, and so they were more business people. And so the company eventually, across the next, 5 to 7 years, imploded because there was no product that kept iterating because they didn't value that, even though they were good people. So they were more sort of, maybe, the business leader type. So I think it's really important to think about, certainly in the technology space, who are the tech core values of what you're doing, and make sure that stays alive and well inside your company, where you can keep the founders. Sometimes founders are disruptives, but that's rare. Usually you can find a way to keep them around doing their thing, even if they might not be an operational leader or a CEO type. They can certainly be a visionary type. Not everybody can be Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs, and do stay through. But they can still be in the mix, at least around for the team.
Well, I just want to thank you, ladies, for this fantastic panel, and I hope you all... I hope you all have learned as much as I have, and hopefully the rest of the day can build on some of the momentum that has been started this morning, was fueled by this conversation, and which will continue this afternoon.
Please join me in thanking Moira Forbes, Dana Moriello, Lori Yoler, and Megan Smith. Thank you very much. That was awesome. You now have a short break. This is a very jam-packed day. You have a 15-minute break. We're going to close the walls, and we're going to go to breakout session number 2.
So inspired by that concept. So.
Shove in.